Moving on to
We're ready to
What are you
move
going to
on.
room in next, kids?
Snow White or Belle first?
You get Snow White up.
Snow White's up.
Let's
What's
do
that?
Belle first.
Okay, let's do Belle first.
I'd like to end on Snow White, and for reasons.
For reasons. Okay. That sounds like trouble.
Oh, I'm
The
sorry.
evil cat.
I'm not supposed to evil laugh into the microphone. I forgot.
Alright, so
So
Belle, tell us about our friend Belle here.
Belle. We have the Disney version of Beauty and the Beast. How many have seen Disney's either version, live or cartoon, of Beauty and the Beast? Birdie and the Beast.
Bergie?
Okay.
Leave Cinderella behind.
Yeah.
Leaving Cinderella behind. All right, now how many know of some of the earlier versions of the story of Beauty and the Beast? We've got one. Do you study this?
Yeah, she's pretty
Okay.
I'm obsessed. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome, that's
One of
We're glad
us.
you keep
One
bringing
of
up
us.
this,
All that kind of stuff.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
So we have the Disney Beauty and the Beast, where we have Gaston, who is, I don't know why anyone is supposed to why are the girls in Beauty and the Beast falling all over him? What is, okay, muscles, but ew. So we
Chest
have-
hair.
Oh. I'm sorry, was that?
Okay.
But Gaston.
I get how it is.
No, Gaston chest hair. No, especially what's presented. No. So, we have Gaston, we
That
have.
would be antler furniture.
Oh yeah, that's thoughtful. Yeah.
I'm in the presence of youngins, I will not make
Yeah.
comments regarding antlers. But, so, we have Gaston, we have her father, who is, kind of in prison. He's, considered the town kind of crazy person. There's a lot of these elements still exist in the earlier version, but they're a little mixed up. In the earlier version of Beauty and the Beast, yes, the father had 3 sons and 3 daughters. Her father was a rich merchant who lost his ships in a storm at sea and became poor. He lost all of his money. They had nothing left but a tiny little cottage at the far end of town. And at one point, Cinderella, I'm going back. Beauty had,
Belle, yes.
she was,
Belle.
Belle, thank you. I have aphasia, so I mix
You're
things
doing
up,
great.
but I'm doing,
You're doing great.
we're good there. So, Beauty, she was the youngest of the daughters. She was the precious one. She was called, Beauty was her nickname when she was little, and it stuck as she got older. Her sisters were jealous of her. She was, just sweet-natured and beautiful in everything that they
And
had
a
wanted.
bookworm.
And a bookworm. She was very, very smart, but she was everything that they would want to be, but just were too shallow to be. And so they always harbored this resentment toward her. Now, the father at one point got news that one of his ships had survived, had come through. After many years, as they've been living on the edge of town, they get news that one of the shipments did come through. And so he's thinking, well, I can regain some of my fortune. So as he's going off on his horse to go, find out what still exists, he asks everybody, well, what would you like me to bring back for you? And the sisters, of course, ask for dresses and jewelry. The sons ask for weapons. And she says first she says nothing. I don't want anything. I just want you to return safely. And he kind of presses her, says, I'm bringing everybody else stuff. I've got to bring you something. She says, then bring me a rose from a part of the country such as a rose that doesn't bloom here, as I haven't seen. So with that in mind, he goes, and as he's on his way back, it turns out that the ship did not make it after all. He has lost his fortune. He's coming back kind of devastated that he's got to come back to his family with nothing for them and nothing but bad news. He comes across a palace that is deserted, but the gates are open. There's a snowstorm. He needs warmth. He needs shelter. He goes in, and there's a stable with fodder for his horse. Somebody had obviously just laid it out. These invisible people had, in this amount of time, had put these supplies out for him. He goes in, and there's food, hot food, and a bed to sleep in, and I thought you were about to interject something. And so he goes in, he eats, he sleeps, he gets rested up, and he gets ready to leave the next day. And he looks out the window, and instead of snow, there's a garden here that has, it's brilliant and lush and green, and there are flowers blooming. And so thinking of he can maybe at least keep the promise to his youngest daughter, he goes out to pick a rose. The second he does that, this horrible beast appears, roaring at him, saying, "I have given you every hospitality. How dare you steal from me?" Well, the father's a little cowardly and craven, and he's cowering, thinking the beast is going to kill him. The beast finally agrees. He's pleading for his life and talking about this family that he has to go back to, and his beautiful young one, I'm doing it again, Beauty, who who was the love of the kind of light of his eye, and that's who this rose was for, just trying to make his story as touching as possible. So the beast says, "Well, you can go home, take whatever you want from, like riches wise, from your stores, take whatever you want for your family, but you have to come back in 3 months to die unless your daughter will come in your stead, and she has to come willingly." So he goes home, and he doesn't want to tell her that I'm going to trade you away from my life. Not hey, I am so cowardly, I'm good, but that I decided you were expendable. But she gets it out of him. He's obviously upset. She gets it out of him, and being kind and sweet and loving, she agrees to go. And so when she gets to the beast castle, he said, first he asks her, "Did you come willingly?" And she's kind of hesitant, like, "Yeah, I guess." She's thinking that the beast is going to kill her in her father's place, and instead the beast says, "You are good-hearted. You're good. Come on in." And they spend time together. There are no little dancing, animated, household items and candlesticks. But there were invisible servants that provided for her every need. She stayed there in luxury and riches, with her every need provided for. And the beast keeps saying, I'm lonely, I want a wife, will you marry me? And she's so honest. She says, "I don't think I can. I can't love you, I can't marry you, but I'll be your friend."
Friend zone.
I was just waiting for that one.
Yeah.
She says, "I'll be your friend." And just to have, he finally has company. So he says, "Okay, then promise me you'll stay here forever and never leave." And she thinks of her family, who, even though they're jerks, they're family, and families are complicated, and she still kind of loves them for some reason. Kind of. So she says, "I just want to see my family one last time, and then I'll come stay with you forever. I promise that we're good." So he gives her a magic ring that she has to turn if she turns it 3 times on her finger, it will bring her back, teleport her back instantly. And a magic mirror where she can see what is going on at the palace with the beast. She goes back home to her family, they're reunited. She takes her own dresses and jewels that the beast had given her, and anytime her sisters touch them, they turn to rags and wilt away, but because they are meant for her only. And when she touches them, they come back. So the sisters are so jealous, and they're just torn with this jealousy. They try to do everything they can to keep her from going back to this luxurious lifestyle that she's had, down to rubbing onions in their eyes to make it look like they've been weeping because they miss her so much and they love their dear sister, and please don't leave us.
And do you smell onions? I'd like to stay, but there's something about you two that's different now.
New perfume? What is
I
that?
feel like I need some chips and dip here.
onions.
Yeah, exactly.
No, she had told the beast had said she had agreed that she would be back in, I think it was a week's time. It varies in the story, but she wasn't back on time. And she delayed, and her sisters kept delaying her until finally she wondered how he was doing and looked in the mirror to see, and found that he was laying half dead in the garden by the rose bush where her father had taken that first rose. He was so in love with her, that was the connection he made, and he had dragged himself out there and was dying. So horrified, she turns her ring 3 times and goes back to him, and she's crying over him, and her tears restored him. It turns out that it was, that he, depending on the version, he had been cursed by a fairy, and...
Berries.
Fairies.
Darn fairies. He had been cursed by a fairy.
Evil fairy.
Oh, I love that. Her tears restored him. And so she, in realizing how much she missed him, she realized how much she loved him. And also he wasn't furry anymore. So, which I guess made a difference. So she agrees to marry him. Her sisters come and the fairy also restored all the servants in the castle from being invisible. They're all back in, their natural, tangible form. The sisters come to visit, the whole family comes to visit, and the fairy points out the sisters and says, no, for being cruel and vicious and evil, you are not going to be a part of this. The fairy turns the sisters into statues outside outside the garden, where they can watch her happiness for all time, but never participate and never have any of their own. And the fairy does say, now this is unless you have a true change of heart. She says, but while greed and gluttony may be overcome, such vile maliciousness would take a miracle. It's basically telling them, you've got no chance.
This is eternity.
Eternity as statues, never moving, never being a part of anything. And Beauty is pretty much okay with this. And so surprisingly, she lives happily ever after with her prince and her poor little statue sisters just kind of standing there watching her for the rest of her life.
And as long as she didn't blink, right? If I'm remembering correctly, you have to keep an eye on those ones. You're going to find them later in your room. That's all I'm saying.
That's kind of a nice, fanciful version of what the sisters probably. But for those of us who have watched our Farscape, the picture of John Crichton as a statue is probably closer to the truth. Yeah.
You caught him in a bad moment, didn't you?
Caught him in a very bad moment. He can hear, he can see, he can feel, and so Belle's sisters, they're trapped outside the castle. They're going to experience the freezing cold, the snow, the wind, the rain, the high temperatures. Birds are going to poop on them.
Yeah, birds again.
Birds again. They're going to nest on them.
Hitchcock was right.
Hitchcock was right, yeah. So this is actually pretty bad as far as punishments go. That for eternity they will be statues unless they can somehow fix themselves, which very so kindly pointed out, not going to happen.
And being turned to stone, that's got to be like having a full body Charlie horse for all of eternity.
Just hold that pose forever.
What happened to Chip? Oh my God. Was Chip okay?
No, Chip's dead.
Chip was fine, honey. It's okay.
I was worried about Chip.
No Chip. No Chip.
So there's a little bit of our difference. She wasn't quite as merciless as some of our other maidens, but still
She let it happen.
she did. And
She did not object to what the fairy did at all.
No, she made her attempts to be part of her family, to save them, to love them, and they just didn't deserve it.
And even then, the whole time the fairy had some kind of chip on her shoulder, not just against the. Yep, I had.
Was that intentional?
That's not an
wow,
accident.
I hate you now.
It's not an accident. Rub it in.
About the sisters, because she was responsible for the magic that turned them into rags and then back to beautiful gowns again. And she was the one who transformed the beast in the first place over a slight of hospitality. Yeah, let me in. Oh, no, you're not really dressed for it. Okay, you're cursed for decades over something that took 30 seconds. Punishment fit the crime. Don't deal with fairies.
It's debatable. Yeah, fairies, I'm telling
Fairies.
you. You gotta watch out for the fairies.
Bad news.
And as far as the Beauty and the Beast story goes, one of the kind of fascinating things that came up in researching this some time ago is that there is a story that it's believed this may have been based on, at least partially. There was an Italian man, Pietro Gonzalago, or something. It kind of translated to Pedro Gonzalez, and he visited the court of King Henry II. And this man, Pedro, had a condition in which it was kind of hypertrichosis. He had Wolfman syndrome. He was completely covered in hair and on parts that usually don't have that much. So he was considered to be kind of not human. Even though he had money, he came from a good family, he was kind of considered a sideshow act. but he was sent to the court of in Netherlands, where he met a beautiful woman and married her, and they had many children who unfortunately inherited the same genetic trait. But people in the court just couldn't believe that this beastly man, even though he was, he was wealthy, he was intelligent, he was, supposed, from the stories, he was kind. They couldn't understand how he got with such a hot girl, and so it became a folk story. It got told down the centuries and turned into this.
Stockholm syndrome. That's how you get the girl.
I'm
He
not
was
sure about
nice.
that. I'm not sure about that.
Gave her a library.
Yeah.
Well, he probably could have.
That's bribery right there, right? Beautiful gowns, jewels.
They take what
So,
works.
little backstory.
All right.
Any questions?
Any questions on Beauty and the Beast?
Or comments
before we
from
move
those
on
who
to
know the
Snow
story?
White, I think. Yes?
When I was very young, I saw a French film of Beauty and the Beast that had subtitles. That sounds very similar to the one, if I remember correctly, because it was so many years ago. I think there were 3 daughters
Yes.
in that version, and it was closer to what you just described.
Right.
And it was a beautiful. It was too bad it was in black and white because it would have been
Yeah.
gorgeous in color.
I think that's a Jean Renoir film, actually, if I remember correctly.
That was a
yeah.
gorgeous film.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one.
I hadn't heard your version about the Gonzalez connection, but a professor once told me that it was also believed that it was because fairy tales were meant to teach us how to live in life, that it was an analogy for an arranged marriage. So
Yes.
first, when you get married to someone you don't know, it doesn't matter what they look like. You think they're ugly. You don't want to marry them. You don't want to talk to them. You're put in this situation by your family. But then over time, as you get to know them, they transform
Yes.
Yeah.
through your eyes, and so then you can come to love them.
I think there's some truth to that,
Because
yeah.
18th century France, women didn't have a whole lot of choice in the matter, especially women who were in noble women. Their marriages were arranged, and they often never met the husband until the moment of the wedding. That was the first time they laid eyes on them. So yeah, that was used as kind of to try to acclimate them to their fate a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
think that's a
thank you.
good point. That's a very good point.